All right, guys, welcome to playbook number 3, Productized. This is probably one of my favorite playbooks because it is really kind of a foundational piece of the whole design to exit course and your journey, right? Your ability to productize and position your service like a product, e-commerce, and even SaaS company. And kind of what I'm going to explain is kind of my productized kind of DNA model. Is going to really set you up for success as far as being able to scale something, grow something that someone's actually going to want to buy, a system, something that's productized. So what I like to start with is the problems we're trying to solve here. So what are we actually solving for with a productized model? So service business owners struggle with designing their business in a way that can scale and operate efficiently without them. Also, most service businesses aren't sellable or scalable, and most people never escape that one-to-one work, which you're trading time for money, which is very, very common for most people when they start service businesses. They're doing the work, but then exiting kind of that trajectory of doing the work over a long period of time is very difficult. Most fail to ever grow beyond themselves. A vast majority, there's a stat, about 90% of small businesses have less than 20 employees. So what does that tell you? The majority of small businesses in general just have a hard time scaling teams that are bigger than themselves in a way that can scale and grow a business in a big way. So this isn't just service businesses, it's businesses in general. But the more we can productize, the more we can actually grow and scale what we're doing. So what's the solution, right? By structuring and position your service offering more like a product and thinking like a SaaS company, you're going to be able to scale and grow your service business like none other before. As well, serving customers, not clients. This is a big mindset shift that I work on a lot with a lot of people. So very, very important. Clients buy your time and services, and customers buy products. So really, really important to kind of make a switch there mentally, which really, really helps. And then number 3 is productize and building out leveraged offerings. So by productizing and building out offerings that don't rely on your time, you're actually able to grow. And we're going to dive more into that in playbook number 5, which is going to be levers and ladders. So what is actually, excuse me, my productized definition, right? So for me, a service offering that is packaged with a set price, a clear picture of what you get, a clear value proposition, set deliverables, defined scope, and all delivered within a set time frame. So the productized service business model takes into account all these key elements. So when I think of a productized service, that's kind of the definition I kind of circle back to as far as what I look and how I look at a productized service. So what are some of the most common pain points that a service business kind of faces? We talked in general when I opened up this slide as far as pain points and solutions in general, but specific things, if we're going to dive a little deeper in what we want to avoid, is going to be really, really vital. And most of these you're going to relate with, and I'll go kind of go through these a little bit faster. But I think it's important to bring them up to light because these are the things we're going to work on solving with kind of a more productized model. So obviously, never-ending workdays, hamster wheel of doom. We're probably all very familiar with this. Really failing to divorce trading time for money. Again, that's a big gap. Not only your time for money, but just in general, that one-to-one kind of realm where you're working and money's coming in. We really want to break that as soon as possible. Again, unpredicted lead flow, very, very common for a lot of service businesses. There's not any machine built around actually creating and generating proper lead flow on a consistent basis. Large feast and famine cycles, very common with service businesses, especially in the beginning stages, is you're hunting for new customers, and then once you get them, you stop hunting to deliver the work. So there's these large ups and downs kind of in the business journey. This is a big one, number 5, saying yes to everything. And really what I see often is a lot of service businesses creating their own scope creep. So part of productizing is obviously defining, getting very specific, and then also saying no to stuff that you don't do, which helps you then streamline things drastically. Again, like I mentioned, working with clients, not customers, hitting a scale ceiling. So that, again, your time, maybe one other person's time on your team, you could only scale so far, right? There's only so many seats in a restaurant that you can sit down at. So that restaurant has a income ceiling no matter what they do. But the beautiful thing about online services is there really isn't a ceiling, as in what we do. So if there is, it's usually put by us and created by you or myself or whoever. And the goal is to remove that scale ceiling completely. Majority one-time projects. A lot of people are just working on one-time projects. Again, when we look at the exit checklist, we want one-time projects are great if they fit into the funnel and lead to more recurring work. Our goal is to have recurring revenue over the long term. Very little to no leverage. Again, a lot of leverage in service businesses come from hiring. So really important to kind of consider. And then struggling with hiring, outsourcing, and delegating, to kind of lean on the last point. This is something we really want to work on as well if this is not your core skill, because again, service businesses leverage technology and a lot of people. So the more we can dial that in, the more we're going to set ourselves up for success. And then not building a long-term asset. No income diversity or concentration risk, or plus concentration risk. Very, very common. And again, these are some of the key points I've mentioned in the exit checklist. We want to make sure our income's coming from a variety of sources over the long term. And then as well that it's, customer risk and concentration risk, both income and where that income's coming from in the business, is spread out. So to recap, here's kind of a chart that you can take a screenshot of. We'll also have it in the workbook. But just keeping this handy, I think, really, really helps because you're more than likely facing a variety, if not all, of these things, or you will throughout your service business journey. So these are things we want to work on fixing. So next, I want to talk about the gap. So what actually separates a typical service business and a productized service? So when I look at the difference between the two, so the gap between a typical service business and what is a productized service is really made up of processes, positioning, and expectations. So these are kind of what productizing solves in many ways. In a typical service business on the left, that you might see an agency, a typical consultancy, or even a freelancer, they don't have processes. They have poor positioning. And they're not setting good expectations. They're saying yes to everything. So these are the things that typically go wrong that I've narrowed down, that if we can really focus on these things on your road to productizing, you're going to have a really solid productized service. So that is kind of what the gap is in my mind. So let's look at the typical journey of a service business entrepreneur and see where the tipping points are when we look at leverage and value in the marketplace. So let me move this over here so we can see this a little better. So so when we're looking at this kind of chart here that I had created, the main goal of this is to really be able to see on the left-hand axis, you have your leverage axis, and then on the bottom axis, you have the multiple as well. So you can see here in the job kind of mountain, which is one of the smaller mountains to climb, you have a salary. You might be an employee. You're trading time for money. You have an hourly position. You're working more one-to-one. And the main goal here is to move up, obviously, the next mountain. But you can see here in this area, we have really no multiple. There's no one buying you or your time, in essence, and you really have very little leverage. So this is where we want to get out of as quickly as possible. And typically going from here to the next mountain, you're taking your skills with you, right? You have some skills you've learned that you are then, hey, I'm a great graphic designer for working for this company, and now I want to start doing it for myself, etc. And insert your core skill set. And that's where selling services kind of come in. So this is a very easy transition for a lot of people and very common. So you can see here in this mountain, you're getting a little higher multiple as far as value creation, but you still have very low leverage, right? This can be pictured as an agency, a freelancer, a consultant. So you have a team, you're starting to charge by your charge per project. Everything is custom still. You're still working with clients, and you have a high churn rate. Customers don't stay on that long, and you're still working one-to-one typically, kind of in this realm here. So we want to kind of exit that as well. And as we move up here, you'll notice that this is kind of where you go from scaling services to having more of a productized service and kind of closing that gap between the two. And typically this honestly happens, and we want to get to this as quickly as possible. But what I've noticed a lot is people end up productizing their service somewhat organically in some cases, because they realize that they just can't scale a typical agency or service business. So they start realizing and doing these things. It just takes a lot longer when you approach it that way, rather than being very proactive, and especially now knowing everything that you know and going through a course like this, you have clarity on, okay, I want to build a productized service. This is where the most value is going to be. So you can notice here immediately we've got recurring revenue, predictability, packages, things are starting to be consistent, repeatable. And typically with a productized service, we're still working one-to-one. You're just not doing the work anymore. And then I have one-to-many and zero-to-many, which we're going to cover in our levers and leverage playbook, which is, maybe you have some different offerings. You might have some workshops, some courses, etc., that are giving you more leverage in your offerings. But you can see here immediately the multiple of value of what you're creating has doubled from about 2 to 4x here. So you've immediately starting to capture more value in the marketplace, and you have a lot more leverage in your business as well, where you're not doing all the work, right? So the next two mountains, which I want to kind of lean on, is to really talk about the value and leverage points of a product business and a SaaS business. So products, which we want to kind of take from, obviously, in what we're building in a service, but productized service is, physical e-commerce, digital products, courses, online programs. These are typically one-to-many or zero-to-many. There's a lot higher leverage in these types of products. And again, you'll see multiples go up quite a bit, and your leverage as well go up a lot. And then lastly, SaaS companies, subscription, sticky, low churn, high lifetime value. You'll notice here, this is where you're getting the most highest multiple and the most leverage as well. And there could be other business models that you could probably fit into this diagram. But for example's sake, I wanted to show you, a basic productized service. But once we start implementing the DNA of a product business and the DNA of a software business, which I'm going to talk on, then your productized service can climb these mountains and get much higher multiples as you scale. So that is kind of what that looks like there. So really, how can we close the gap and steal from the best? And when I say the best, is like, how can we steal from a SaaS company and a product business and really enhance and multiply the value of our productized service? So this is kind of where I see a productized service kind of fitting, is taking, the business model of a SaaS and even building out a tech-enabled service, and then as well positioning like a product and selling it just like an e-commerce product off Amazon. So SaaS and product models, I wanted to kind of dive in and just share with you a little bit of what this looks like and why these are so valuable. So again, self-service. So we want to lean towards how can we build something that's self-service. Someone can go on our site and just buy without talking to anybody. High margin. How can we ensure our margins are, as high as possible to drive as much profit as possible? Predictable. Again, month over month, year over year? How can we create more predictability, which lowers the risk profile as well? As a productized service business owner and manager, make your life a lot happier and easier. Low churn, and then strong leverage as well. A lot of these businesses have. And then one thing that I love to kind of work towards is a no sales close. Most SaaS and product businesses, unless they're very high ticket or enterprise, you can just buy on their site. You don't need a salesperson to close them. Again, SaaS and product businesses typically very sticky, especially subscription products, very scalable, typically innovative, and you're building an asset from day one, either a brand or a product or software that is going to be worth something down the road. You also have a lot of recurring revenue. Typical SaaS businesses and good product businesses are structured in a way that have a lot of recurring revenue, which is exactly kind of what you want. Long lifetime value. They have a higher exit multiple, which we kind of discussed in that chart. Consistency and desirable, right? So I will say the grass is always greener, right? You have a service business, you're like, oh, I wish I had a SaaS business, or I wish I had a product business. And it's funny because then you talk to SaaS companies and product companies or e-commerce companies, and they're wishing they had a SaaS company or they wish they had a service business. So just keeping that in mind, I think obviously we're building a service business because that's within our core strengths. And that's why you're kind of here building a productized service. So just keeping that in mind, I think people kind of it's easy to lose context. And you're running, like I said, a service business for a reason. It fits your core strengths. This is the reason you didn't start a SaaS or product business. So my goal is to simply help you water your own grass to make it greener. So the old saying goes, the grass is always greener, but then I say, the grass is greener where you water it. So just kind of focusing on that and keeping that in mind. So I'm bringing up these examples of and the key takeaways of why SaaS companies and product companies are valuable. But my goal is to take those elements and mold them into our service business and productized service. So remember, when you have processes, you have predictability. When you have predictability, you have peace of mind. When you have great positioning, you have clarity for both you and the customer. And when there are superb expectations, you have the happy and repeating customer base. So really important to kind of keep these in mind. And again, close that gap, right? The gap between a typical service business and a productized service. And you're going to be building something extremely valuable and enjoyable in the meantime while you work on it. So I wanted to touch on positioning because positioning is a really important part of building a successful productized service. And really a lot of positioning that I take, obviously learning from SaaS companies are great, but really a product business, we're really mimicking and mirroring e-commerce or product-based companies. How can we position our service as a product, hence productizing? So thinking like a SaaS and product business is really, really important. But I really want to unpack what really great positioning looks like. And I love to use the example of imagining you are selling your service on Amazon. What does that actually look like? So I think that is a good visual to lean in towards and actually use as an example to create and position your service business. So to start out, I'm going to leverage, these are some vegan cheddar macadamia nuts. I love these. And I wanted to use this as an example to show you kind of the positioning and how Amazon positions much of their products and what you can take, right? So first thing is very clear imagery around the product that you're receiving, right? There's extra images as well across the left-hand side. So you have a variety of angles that you can see the product and everything about it, right? Next, you have a very clear title and headline with social proof as well. And then you have a very clear description of exactly what you're getting and the benefits of this product. Then you have the pricing. typically one-time or subscribe option as well. Then you have the exact delivery date. When are you getting this product back when you purchase it? So expectations are really clear. And then we also have a very clear call to action with the add to cart button right there. So you have the ability to buy it right on the site, which is obviously key. So this is really the norm, right, for an e-commerce store. You're not rolling the dice when you make a purchase. You know exactly what you're going to order and when you're going to get it. So again, just kind of mentally checking those boxes as far as, is my service business actually positioned like that? So do you actually have that clarity? If not, we've got some work to do. And again, this helps you bring clarity to what you're actually building and what's missing, so you can actually work towards proactively kind of fixing those holes in your service business. So you may be asking, like, what is actually positioning my service business like a product accomplish exactly, right? So like, you know, what are the benefits and the pluses around actually positioning my service business like a product on Amazon? So I thought it would be nice to kind of go through this because there are some very distinct reasons. It's not just arbitrary on why this works and why you should be doing this if you have a service business. So one is really to create structure around what you do, extremely important. All right, and number two, the important thing is it offers clarity around what you don't do, which is really, really important. Number three, it filters bad customers away. So again, it's the saying yes and no to everyone, or saying yes to everyone. By productizing, you're now saying no. So you're filtering people out that don't fit into exactly what you do. And number four, having clear packages of what you offer your customers is incredibly clear. It helps set incredible expectations on what they're buying from the very beginning, which is one of the biggest parts where people kind of miss the mark when they're structuring a productized service. Next is it presents your value ladder in positioning with uber clarity, which is really, really important. And it sets up the rest of your funnel for success. A lot of people miss the mark here and don't realize that, you know, a customer's experience from the very beginning, even from buying and going through the checkout process to how everything is positioned, etc., is a huge, huge part of setting that customer up for success over the long term and their experience with your service offering. And then as well makes sales much easier. When you have everything positioned like this, it's easier for someone to buy. And that's a huge, obviously positive through the process as well. So what isn't obvious is that your positioning actually travels and carries through your entire funnel, which I kind of alluded to. And I think a lot of people just don't realize how maybe a bad experience or bad expectations on the front end can kind of ruin or sour the customer experience when they're actually buying and going through your funnel over the long term. So really, really important to kind of keep that in mind. So when you package up your service offering like this, you'll be able to actually escape or avoid most of the common service business traps most agencies, et cetera, are pulled into. So by productizing and positioning your product, your service like a product, it's actually going to automatically help you avoid a lot of the problems which we've talked about earlier in this lesson as well. So again, my goal for you is like, how can we paddle with the current and not against it? Too many service businesses just create such an upward battle and make it so much harder on themselves than it needs to be. So I really want to help you avoid that, especially as you're building and working to productize and scale what you're doing. So again, I wanted to dive in and just kind of touched on the benefits of a product business, a little bit of a SaaS, but like, why position ourselves like a SaaS company, which is the other aspect of kind of that diagram I showed you. And again, it builds great recurring revenue, which again, we want to circle back to. We want monthly recurring revenue in our business in some aspect. Again, we don't want to force it. if we don't need to. For example, when I ran Applause Lab, that business model, initially, I tried to force into a monthly recurring model, but someone didn't need a video testimonial every single month. So we changed it to an annual recurring subscription, which worked really well because someone's more apt to buy a package of video testimonials every year that we could use throughout the year rather than monthly. So that was kind of an adjustment. And again, if I would have kept that business, I would have looked for other opportunities as well to drive recurring revenue. Again, refining your average revenue per customer, just kind of knowing what this is, and then enhancing it, tracking lifetime value, both time in months, etc., and in money revenue, and then as well low barrier downside to get started. A lot of SaaS companies obviously have trials, free type of sign up options. So where can you kind of lower the barrier to entry to get people to get to know you and try what you're offering? Next is knowing your cost to acquire a customer, and then as well enhancing your overall gross margin over time. So again, positioning and thinking like a SaaS company, there's a lot of elements, but again, as you productize, and we take and steal some of these aspects from a product business and SaaS business, these are the things that you want to start thinking about in implementing in your tracking and thinking of yourself like a SaaS business. So I wanted to just walk you through some examples of good and bad positioning, right? So you can actually see what that looks like when compared to like a typical agency versus an actual person or company who's productized their service offering. So I'm going to go ahead and exit our screen here just to show you these examples that I pulled up. I'm going to show you a couple, but you'll notice here that I have quite a few linked from graphic design, podcasting, copywriting, developing, SEO. So I'm going to look at graphic design and copywriting for this example, and then you can also take a look at some of these other examples that I have listed in the slides. So first, we're going to look at a graphic design option. Typical agencies are going to be positioned similar to this, right? Hey, here's our graphic design service. We can design, a variety of things for you. Get a quote, right? There's a lot of friction here. I have to literally fill out what I want. Then I have to wait for you to get back to me. And again, if we look back to the Amazon example, this is just poor positioning. We do a little bit of everything. There's no specific thing that this company does as far as graphics. They'll literally design anything you need with a variety of designers. But we have no idea what the cost is. We can't buy on their website. So again, I'm sure they might do incredible work, but their positioning and expectation setting is very poor. They're set up just as a typical agency that you'll find. So I wanted to show you kind of what this looks like. So this, in my mind, would be an example of some poor positioning in the marketplace, regardless of how good they are. And a great example would be this company called Ad Pros, and they have a product called Done For You Creatives, right? So you can kind of come to their website, and you'll notice that they just do creatives and graphic design for Facebook ad campaigns. So very specific, very niche. It's very clear what you get, and they have very clear call to action. If you want to talk to someone, great. If you want to order, you can literally just push one button and you can go right to their order page, select which package you would want, how many creatives, and literally check out right there. So really, really cool setup as far as positioning goes and clarity. But you can see here, this is positioned much more like a product. Great examples, very clear expectations on how the process works. And then as well, clarity of what you get and different packages and structured as a monthly recurring option with a great FAQ at the bottom. So this is a great example of positioning yourself more like a product. And I know that these guys do really, really well. Next, I want to show you a copywriting example, which I think would be really, really great to look at. So again, a typical agency. So this copywriting agency, is what I would consider positioned very poorly. Again, we have copywriting agency. They just start out with an about us section, kind of their process, how they work, their core values and beliefs, which are great, but not really associated to like what I'm trying to get done right now, which is copywriting. What they do, again, similar to that graphic design example, and then their expertise, and then fill out a form to talk with us. So there's no option to buy. There's no clarity around pricing. I have to wait to hear back from them, and probably have a phone call before we can even begin to get a proposal to then start working. So again, this is one example of not how to position. If you are positioned like this, we want to move towards more of a productized model. But to show you kind of a good example of a copywriting service is Copywriting Crew. So again, we have fast and affordable copywriting. They do offer a variety of different service offerings, but they're very clearly outlined. And again, if we scroll down, let's just click their blog writing page. So very clear on what we're getting. We have a video to show us what we're getting. We can actually click and see the pricing. And here's kind of cool. They actually let you select the length. Let's say we want 1,000 words, and we want to have let me see here if this slides. Okay, one a month. So you'll notice here that we have monthly, quarterly, and yearly with discounts based on how you pay, which I think is really cool. And for example, if you want a monthly option here, you can literally just choose the plan, and that option is available, and you can check out right on their website here. So I really like the way they position their service offering, as well as detail around their service, how it works, what's included, social proof, and FAQs. So they do a great job of just overall positioning and productizing their copywriting service in this case. So great example to reference. What I'm going to do as well for you guys is share with you the database of productized services that I've been working on building, so you'll have access to that within this course. I'll add that as well. And the reason why that's going to be valuable is it's going to give you context and examples of a lot of different productized services in a variety of different niches, right? Like podcasting, development, lead generation, SEO. Because what I've found is really helpful is to see kind of how other people are productizing and positioning their offering. And if you're offering SEO services, looking at how other SEO companies are doing it is really helpful. And the same with lead generation, podcasting, et cetera. You may have a variety of different, whatever you're offering. It's always good to look at relevant examples, right? So let me go ahead and go back into presentation mode, and we will continue. Perfect. So definitely check out some more of those examples and the database as well as something to reference. Next, I want to look at different models, right? So we've looked at like positioning and kind of understanding what's good, what's bad, but there's a lot of different ways to actually position your productized service that I think is really valuable. And there's a lot of different types of models that you can leverage, none of which are there's a lot of ways you can do it based on your goal and what your service offering is, right? There's no right or wrong way to position your productized service. So I think this helps for examples on how you can actually build out your productized service. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so productized model use cases. So we're going to be diving in through a few different use cases here, which I think are going to be really valuable. And again, these can be when you're creating a productized service, you might be launching something completely new, which is, where a lot of people start. You might be adding on a service, right? You might already have some services and you're like, hey, I want to add on a productized service. Or you might be transitioning services as well, where you have a typical agency and you're like, I'm tired of this. This is not going to work based on my long-term goals. And you might be transitioning into a productized service offering. So the first type of model that we're going to look at is a one-off model. So you're offering a single one-time offering or package, just like Roast My Landing Page, 24 Voices, or Fix Your Sales Call. So you can look at some of these examples, and remember, you still have the option to upsell into recurring packages or plans after this one-time sale. So for example, Roast My Landing Page, what they do is they will go through your landing page for a fixed one-time cost, and they'll actually tell you what's wrong with it. Here's what's good, here's what's bad, here's what you should do to fix your landing page. And so Ollie does a great job of kind of diving in and breaking down your pages. And I actually did an interview with Ollie, which I will link here. I'm just going to make a note. Where he talks about kind of how he structured his business, et cetera, which I think will be valuable. But essentially, yeah, so he's a great example of a one-time offering with as well the option to upsell. So he has his basic one-time offer on the front end, which I think it's a fixed price of, I think, $199. And he may have, you used to be able to just buy it right off the site. But anyway, so he has a one-time offer on the front end, and then he upsells you into a consulting package on the back end. So a good way to kind of structure it. The same thing with 24 Voices, and then Fix Your Sales Calls. They're going to actually review your sales calls for a one-time fee, and then they have coaching and consulting offers on the back end as well. So these are some good examples of just like what a one-off kind of model looks like, but you're not limited to just a one-type model. Sometimes it's good to position kind of a one-time offer on the front end that leads into a back end of offerings, if that makes sense. Cool. So next is going to be the packaged-based model. So pay for a package or quantity of X upfront. So we have a couple examples here of Edit Video Calls, Rev, Lead Design, or Testimonial Hero. So these are great examples of this type of model, which is package, where you might sell a set number of services packaged up. So Edit Video Calls, for example, they're going to offer a package of they turn your Zoom calls into short videos. So they might say, hey, we'll sell you a package of 4 of these per month. And then you can upgrade or downgrade from there, but you have a set package that you are buying. So same thing with Rev. You can buy a package of a variety of offerings from transcriptions, etc. Lead Design offers a variety of packages around, excuse me, presentation designs, and then Testimonial Hero sells packages of video testimonials as well. Next, we have the unlimited model, which is very, very common and popular. So you've seen this as probably more in the marketplace than not. So pay one monthly fee and get an unlimited amount of requests or access to that service. So most popular, you've noticed, Design Pickle, 55 Knots, which is a design service, graphic design. Design Pickle does graphic design as well. WP Buffs is an unlimited service for WordPress fixes. And then Hub Snacks is an unlimited service, not on WordPress, but on HubSpot. So very similar to WP Buffs, but just a different platform. So this is interesting, and I have kind of mixed feelings because although it's great from a marketing perspective from the unlimited side, one thing to note here, if you're considering this kind of positioning and your model, is it's not actually unlimited, right? So most unlimited plans aren't actually unlimited, and they're throttled by the turnaround times in order queue. So a 2-day turnaround in an average 30-day month equals 15 actual requests. So for example, Design Pickle, they're going to sell you a set price. If we open up their website and we go to pricing, I'll kind of give you a real example here. So for example, they're $400 a month, and they have a 1 to 2 day turnaround. So let's just say that their turnaround time is just 2 days, right? So we have $399, 2-day turnaround, which is in a 30-day month, 15 requests you could make. So you're paying about $26 a request if you max out their system, right? If everything goes perfect and you max out the 15 to $20 or number of requests, you're going to be paying that per request, right? And in which case, and I've used services like these, it's very hard to do. And oftentimes there's delays on both ends, right? Especially with services like this, we're outsourcing to the Philippines. You're not getting your request back, right away. That's going to vary. And then you have to review it if you have time to do it right then. So you can imagine they're plus or minus a few days on each end. So that companies like this are really making money, or a majority of their money, by people not using the service fully. And even if they do max it out, it's very hard to do as well. So the main goal that I wanted to bring up is just, doing the math and just kind of looking at this from a positioning standpoint, because even though a lot of these companies leverage the unlimited marketing and positioning, there is an actual limit and an order queue that they have. So some companies will let you do more than one request at a time if you pay more, etc. But something to kind of consider as well when you're positioning your service, because a lot of people do not think about that from the customer side when they're buying, but then as well from the positioning side of the actual productized service. But these are all great services and examples that I would definitely review because they all do a very great job and are all very successful within their own spaces. So if you're considering an unlimited model, just looking at some of the pros, the cons, and examples of others in the marketplace. Next is going to be the done with you model. So this one's kind of an interesting one, especially if you're a consultant or anything like that. And we look at this as like info products, courses, plus your skills in consulting, right? So the done with you model is really an offering your service alongside a guided program or info product. So one example is Chris over at Webinar Grow. He does a great example of helping SaaS companies create high converting webinars. And he has a program that they kind of go through. And then he also offers coaching and consulting alongside of it. So that's kind of an interesting way to position yourself from a consulting side. And the done with you model is really great. And you can have a do it yourself kind of fully automated course, but then you can also have a done with you model as well, where, there's a lot of leverage built into the course element, but then as well, you're offering services on top of that. So that's an interesting way to structure what you do as well. Next, we're going to look at just a straight recurring model, which is very popular. And again, this is built into a lot of different service businesses, but a service offering where people need it on a recurring basis. So most commonly monthly, which we want to kind of really stick to if we can. Monthly, you might see quarterly or biannually or even annually. But this is going to be the most common, right? So we've got Content Pros, which is a content writing service, which is the previous productized service I sold. And we offered monthly recurring content plans, similar to the example I showed you with Copywriting Crew earlier. Very similar business model on a monthly basis. Podreacher turns podcasts into blog posts on a monthly basis. Email at Scale, they write email newsletters on a monthly basis for your business. Ad Pros, which I did show you before, they do monthly options for Facebook ad creative design, and the Hoth does monthly SEO packages. So again, these are great examples to look at. You'll also have most of these in our productized service database, which I'll give you access to. But again, you have the credit card on file, and you provide consistent value month over month for a packaged offering. So really, really important as well as you look at some of these examples and we look at the recurring model specifically. Next is going to be the performance model, which is also really interesting. And I think we're going to see a lot more productized services kind of popping up in this kind of space and the performance model, because it is such great positioning. So when we look at this company specifically, I wanted to highlight, it's a company called Jolly SEO. And they work specifically on a performance basis, right? So you can sign up for Jolly for free. I think there is a deposit you put down what you get back, and is applied to their future work just to kind of filter people to see if they're serious or not. But they only get paid when they get you a domain authority, I think 50 plus backlink. So you're paying them for backlinks, and they only get paid when they land you that specific backlink. So very, very cool model, and I've seen them be able to scale drastically while working together, because they are also in our Productized Mentor group, and scale from $30,000 to over $100,000 a month. And I think a big part of that is obviously their positioning in the market is really, really strong when it comes to a paid performance model. All right, let's dive into the next model, which is going to be kind of a mesh hybrid model. So a lot of these that I'm sharing with you actually can be applied together, separately, etc. So taking kind of different ways of how people are positioning. So it's not a one size fits all or an exclusive type of thing to your business. I think the mesh model, which you'll see very commonly, is very popular. So mix multiple models into one, with one-time leading to recurring. So for example, Applause Lab, which was the previous productized service I had before I sold it, we had a discounted first video testimonial that then led into a recurring option. Ad Zombies has a variety of one-off packages and then also recurring options and a course element. Bean Ninjas as well. All these companies offer very similar, right? So how can you mix and match different models that we're talking about today and kind of fit them into what's going to work for your business, right? I think loss leaders, one-time offers on the front end, or even free kind of material on the front end that leads in and leads people through really your value ladder of offerings, however you structure that, is really, really important. So take a look at those examples as well, as far as different companies that are positioning themselves in the market in kind of some unique ways. Next is going to be the coaching model, which is really interesting as well. Let me go ahead and just go full screen again here. So the coaching model is really interesting. So if you're a consultant or a coach and kind of wondering how can I position myself in the marketplace, and these are some great examples. So like for myself, I offer one-to-one unlimited asynchronous coaching for a set monthly fee for Productized Mentor, where you're able to message me anytime about anything, and I respond back to you every Thursday with a Loom video or text on WhatsApp. So that's kind of a fun way to position kind of the coaching in a productized way. Ari Meisel, who runs Less Doing, he offers something very similar with kind of what he calls a coach in a pocket, but he leverages, instead of WhatsApp, he leverages Voxer. There's also virtual health consulting. So this Dr. Alexis Shields, she's done a really great job in positioning and packaging up her knowledge up into hourly blocks. But yeah, this is more probably traditional consulting, which I think is fine, but just a different way to kind of package up what you're doing. And then Destination Legal, which is a group of lawyers. They actually help package up their legal advice with consulting and course offerings as well. So some different offers as well, or just examples that you can kind of take a look at if you're kind of more offering services and coaching kind of opportunities. So next is going to be the add-on model. So Agent Fire and the Church.co, they build one-time websites with a majority of their revenue coming from add-ons like ongoing hosting, maintenance, updates, etc., and other variety of upsells, right? So Agent Fire offers websites for real estate agents, and the Church Co. offers websites for churches. So very specific and niche offerings, but that's kind of what an add-on model would look like. So to recap, we've got our one-off model, our done-with-you model, mesh hybrid model, package-based model, recurring, coaching, unlimited, performance, and our add-on. So definitely taking a look at like all these different types of ways to position your offering. And you might, again, have the mesh or mix model where you're taking a variety of these, but really looking at, and what we're going to dive into, the leverage and levers and leverage playbook is looking at your value ladder. Where are there holes, and what are the best ways to position what you're doing? So again, looking at the productized database is really going to help provide a lot of examples here as well. All right. So one thing that I love to do, and which I think is really important, and there's a great book called The Road Less Stupid. Now, it's one of my favorite business books, and it's by the author Keith Cunningham. And he talks a lot about, in one of his thinking time processes, is your ability to look at the upsides and the downsides of a particular investment, business, etc. So I wanted to apply that to this because as we look at the productized service model, it's easy to get caught up in all the pros, all the best things, the upsides of this type of model. And obviously, I'm a huge proponent of productizing and positioning your service this way. But I think to a lot of points, and some people might bring up, is there's obviously some downsides as well. And I thought this would be good to kind of go through and look at not only some of the upsides, which we know about, as well the downsides. Because no matter what you're doing, I think it's always great to kind of just have those top of mind as well. So we always tend to focus on the upsides of our ideas and fail to actually evaluate the downsides, right? So what are the actual upsides and downsides of a productized service model? I'd love for you to kind of, if you want to write this down and jot some of this stuff down or take some notes, or just kind of outline what your thoughts are, like what are some of the upsides and downsides of this model? And then as well, we know we want to leverage it compared to a typical service business model, but what am I not seeing? So what are those kind of blind spots in the process that you just might not know, right? So I figure we start out with some of the upsides, which we've kind of talked about, obviously, in this playbook to date, but just quickly to kind of review, obviously, upsides are seamless sales process, right? We have predictable execution. We have streamlined operations. We have lower labor cost potential. We get paid faster and we get paid up front. There's no more growth ceiling. We typically, can really find strides in niching down in the whole riches and niches kind of philosophy. We're building something more valuable when we're productizing. But what are the actual downsides that we're not considering, right? And I think these are what's really interesting, and I think definitely something to do some thinking time on as we're looking at this model, because a lot of people don't talk about this. So one thing is having to be diligent in saying no to stay in scope, right? I think when you have a typical service business and you say yes to a lot of things, it's actually you're saying yes to obviously a variety of things, which isn't good from a scalability standpoint, but it is good for cash flow, getting customer feedback, which I definitely encourage at the beginning. As you're working to productize, you're really trying to find product market fit, right? So it's hard sometimes to say no, but you have to really be diligent, and sometimes that can be a hard thing to do when you're transitioning from a typical service business into a productized service. The second thing, which could be a potential downside, is it's hard to retain fast-growing customers who want more, right? By saying no to someone, because you'll notice a lot, typically if you're offering services right now, is when someone signs up with you for, let's say, blog content or whatever, then they also might want graphic design for their service, or they also might need help implementing that into their CMS. They also might need help with SEO. So people who they like you, they trust you, they're already paying you for something, it's really easy for them to also just go back to you for those things. And I think initially, obviously, we're saying no to a lot of things, and you're saying, hey, all I do is write blog posts. But now you're actually leaving other money on the table, for those customers who want more and who are maybe growing really quickly and need to hire out more of the processes and services. Next is systems can kill team creativity. So this is one that isn't really talked about a lot. And I think when you're looking at productize, the number one thing people do is like, okay, cool, we need to build processes. We need to build this machine. And if you're not careful when you're doing that, the systems that you're creating that create predictability can also kill creativity and make it very hard for your team to do those set processes over and over and over again, which become very monotonous over the long term. So you might have high churn of team members as well. It can just kill creativity, right? So I think you have to think of that when you're building out processes. I like to think about building out frameworks that someone can follow that still creates consistency, but let someone creative kind of still have a little bit of wiggle room to not feel like they're just trapped inside this box where they can't do anything else, right? So something to think about there. Next is you're subject to commodity pricing, right? So when you really productize, like right now in the graphic design space, there is a lot of unlimited graphic design companies, which is going to make it very hard. It's turning into more of a commodity. There's a lot of market out there, so I'm not saying there's not opportunity, but how can you set yourself apart? How can you be different? When you are a commodity, it is going to be very hard to be different, as well as charge more as well. So something to think about. Next, like I mentioned, less short-term cash and profit potential. So typically when you're a service business, you're saying yes to everything. You're in a position for what we call like cash grab type of businesses, right? But when you're saying no and you're turning away people for a specific offering and service that you provide, you're saying no to potential cash flow in the meantime as well. So that's something to consider. Are you able to kind of bridge that gap where you're saying no, you're productizing, you're streamlining, but revenue might go down, right? It's the classic, taking a couple steps back to make a leap forward, right? Next is it takes substantial intention, time, and process-driven mindset to actually be able to execute the productized service model. So you need to be able to kind of have that top of mind. Is that your strength? Is that something that you have time to do, the runway to do, right? Next is getting traction in product market fit is a grind. It's something that takes a lot of time, effort, energy. It's something rarely that's just hit out of the box on your first try. And I think that's something that's not talked about a lot is the runway that you need to be able to find product market fit and get traction is often, that 1,000-day principle that you're, talked about a lot, originally coined by Kevin Kelly, is, very, very true. I mean, it usually takes 1 to 3 years to really get that dialed in. And I found that true with content pros. I think with Applause Lab, we were able to hit the mark a lot faster. But I see that as well with a lot of businesses. So something to kind of keep in mind as well, depending on your personal situation and your runway cash-wise on what you're willing to invest. But just, again, knowing some of these downsides, really, really important. And then another one is you need to have proper runway of capital, like I mentioned, to dial in that product market fit. So that's something that's really important as well. So again, those are some thoughts and ideas around the downsides of a productized service. So kind of keeping those top of mind. How can we avoid those? How can we keep those, at least there in our peripheral vision to be aware of as well if you're diving into this model. So let's dive into the next playbook.